This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to continue my algae talk with Terry Arko. And in this episode, we're going to focus on black algae treatment as well as phosphate treatments for swimming pools. And I think you're going to learn a lot about phosphates and phosphate treatments in this episode. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. For me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. Now, a pool guy trick, and this goes back a long way, and it's a product that I always caution use on. You got to know how to use it, but the HASA algae ban is a great product to use for black algae. Also, those pools where the algae doesn't seem to be going away. If you put 10 pounds of this product in the pool, carefully, mind you, in certain pools, you can't use it in like colored plaster pools but majority of pools, you can definitely use this in. It seems to be highly effective against black algae, other kinds of algae, the mustard algae that's just stuck on the plaster that looks almost like a stain.
Yeah.
HASA algae ban after 24 hours with the pool off just takes all that off.
And again, so let's look at what's going on here and I did pools for 10 years. And there's lots of different reasons why you're going to have algae and particularly black algae. But I have the black algae pools and, those pools had 3-4 ppm chlorine. I kept that maintained pretty much, week in, week out. They were being cleaned and everything else, but yet there's that black algae still sitting there, surviving in a chlorinated environment. So that black algae had adapted. It has adapted to that small amount of chlorine for maintenance that was being used. You get the algae ban. Now what are you doing? You're just bombing. You're putting that concentrated 90% chlorine right on top of that thing. And it can't handle it. And same with the mustard algae. I do want to reiterate what you just said. Algae ban is a great product for black algae spots. It's heavy. It'll settle down on it. But that's only a product for white plaster use. I would not use that in any kind of colored aggregate. Definitely would never use it on a vinyl liner or a fiberglass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it does work really effectively, and it brings that chlorine level up to unreadable levels. It's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, it's you're putting like 99%, I think, trichlor.
Yeah, and then the question I get a lot, and I kind of think I know the answer, but I'll ask you is, if you're using a brush and you're brushing black algae off a pool, and then you go to another pool and you use that brush in there, you can actually. Well, can you transfer it to the other pool?
Oh yeah, No doubt at all.
Yeah.
And I, again, personally, I've seen this happen many times, and I've talked to pros where this has happened. I had an experience in our own our public recreational pool in our town in Snohomish, an indoor pool, which. The operator, when I met with the operator early on when the pool had just opened, he said, I'm not going to need any algicides. I'm not going to need any of that because this pool is never going to get algae. And one of the misconceptions he had was the fact that because the pool was indoors, there's no way that algae could grow because it couldn't get any photosynthesis directly from the sun. But as it turns out, they closed that pool down and they for a private party. And this private party of people were allowed to bring their rafts and their inner tubes that they use in the river into the pool. That was on a Saturday. And on a Monday morning at 7:30, that operator was calling me on the phone, telling me, can I come by and look at the pool? Because he's got green algae growing in the pool now. And, that was my bit of detective work that I did with him on the deck. I said, what's gone on here? And then he snapped his fingers and he's like, oh, all those people brought their inner tubes from the river. Mm-hmm. They then made it a policy that nobody can bring anything from outdoors into the pool.
That's funny. Now, the question that I'm going to get and you're going to get now is we talked about how the algicides kind of overfeed the algae and the phosphate removers actually work differently than that, don't they?
Yeah. And, so I always like to say this first when we talk about phosphate removers, because so nobody gets nervous, but phosphate removers are not algicides, and they're not really intended to be used as algicides directly. They won't work, actually quite the contrary. So, and that was kind of an early misnomer when we launched our phosphate remover and put it out there in the market. And then you'd get pool guys that would have a pool that was green like a swamp, and they'd go, "Oh, I'm going to pour phosphate remover in here," and nothing would happen. And we're like, "Yeah, that's not the intent. That's not what the product is. It's not an algicide." And in fact, that's where the whole teaching we would teach and say, "Look, the way to do this is if you have a swamp pool or a very green pool, you have algae present. You need to kill that algae with a traditional method like high chlorine, an algicide, or both, or whatever. You want to kill that algae first. Once you've killed that algae, that's the time to use the phosphate remover. And the reason for that is that the phosphate is a nutrient for the algae. And so if you have visible algae that's really growing, and you have something that's a food source, well, where do you think the most of that nutrient is? It's not in the water so much. It's inside of that visible algae. When you kill that visible algae, what happens? The nutrient now is in the water. And that's true of phosphate. So when you kill algae, you're actually releasing phosphate into water. And that's the time to do a phosphate removal, and understanding that a phosphate remover is not an algicide. It is a phosphate remover. That's all it's designed to do. And so using it, properly, using it from that standpoint is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, of course, it's so successful, because if you're using it as a kind of a maintenance thing on a pool, PR 10,000, you're not going to really have those algae blooms because you're removing that one of a few food sources from algae.
Yeah, so let's go back. If you go back, green algae, which is the most common, right, that we deal with, but black algae, which is the cyanobacteria, and I pointed out that there's pretty much everything in the pool water that algae needs at lower levels to thrive. The thing with cyanobacteria, especially the black algae, and I do want to point out that cyanobacteria can harbor within green algae. So you can have, when you see green algae, you can go, "Oh, that's green algae." Well, it could be green algae and cyanobacteria together, which makes it even more resistant, which makes it even more dependent on the phosphate. one of the things I learned in the research we did when I was working on that with that scientific team was that they classify phosphates as a growth limiting nutrient. It's kind of a weird term, growth limiting nutrient, but basically what that term means is that if you took away all those things I stated, the nitrogen and the little bits of metal and all that stuff that algae likes to be comfortable, if you took all of those away, but you still had phosphate in the water, the algae could still survive. Okay. The contrary to that is if you left all of those things in, but you take the phosphate out, the algae can't grow. That phosphate is what they call the growth limiting nutrient. That's kind of the magic seed in all of this stuff. So algae needs a lot of different things, and phosphate is a growth limiting nutrient. So you take that away, and it's much harder for algae to thrive.
And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. And I'm dating myself here, but back, I'm going to say in 2010, if you walked into a supplier and the guys were at the counter and there's other pool guys in there, and you mentioned that you're using phosphate remover, most of them would be like, that stuff's snake oil. Why the change over the years to now that if you take that conversation today, people would be like, why aren't you using phosphate remover? It works. Yeah. So what was the shift, in that thinking? Why was it all the old timers didn't really believe in it?
It's, I think it's just, it was unknown. We didn't know about it. We basically learned about it from industrial water, from lake treatment water, where they've known about this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's very common in lakes, lake technology, where they would do phosphate removal. The EPA, it's a strange thing because the EPA has a mandate to farms that are near lakes, these big agricultural farms like, industrial, chicken and ranches, that they have to, obviously any runoff coming from those areas that would be going into a lake is going to be loaded with nutrients, phosphate being one. The EPA actually has a mandate for these farms and everything that they have to control their runoff going into that lake, and they have to minimize their phosphates. That's been going on for a long time. That's interesting from that standpoint with the EPA. But the other side of the EPA is that the EPA also has a mandate to drinking water municipalities that they have to practice anti-corrosion of their pipes, and the chemical that they use for anti-corrosion is an orthophosphate. So there's a very weird dynamic right there, right? Mm-hmm. But in the lake and pond industry, they've been dealing with this for a long time. We didn't know about it with pools, and of course, like anything new, you try to start to introduce something new, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, we've never heard of that," or it's voodoo and everything else. And I was one. So it was 1998, I believe, is when we first launched that. And I was tasked with going out into the pool industry and educating on phosphates. I think I was one of the only people at the time doing that. And I got all the responses, it's snake oil, it's this and that and everything. And my only response to that would be to say, well, hey, why don't you take one pool that's your problem pool or whatever, and just give it a try and see what happens. And, numerous guys that weren't believers became believers very quick when they saw the difference it made just in lowering down phosphate levels in the pool. And I guess you can kind of see how the industry went, because when we introduced our phosphate remover, which with C-Clear was probably one of the first or the first, there wasn't even a test for phosphates in the pool industry. It didn't exist. Now you could go to Lake and Pond and you could get, they had strips and they had phosphate. Other industries had phosphate test kits. So for a while there, we were telling people, well, hey, you need to go to this agricultural site and you can, get test strips for phosphates. And we were having to educate on how to read it. Then we got to a point where we actually developed our own phosphate test kit, which was very clunky because we weren't test kit manufacturers. You could see the acceptance and the validity of this, and the phosphates became more real, and it grew in the industry to where then you had, reputable test companies like Taylor and Lamont now producing phosphate test methods also.
Yeah.
So,
In the end of the segment, I got to tell you, I took a gallon of the C-Clear phosphate remover. I had a pool that no one used, and I was going to test an overdose. So I'm like, I wonder if I pour this whole gallon in this pool, what would happen? So I put the whole gallon in the pool, and I came back the next week. The filter pressure was like at 40. There was so much fallout in the pool. It took me like 3 weeks to clean this thing up, 3 filter cleans, and I finally got the pool back to normal. So you can overdose. I gotta let the guys know that it's something that you can overdose on.
Yeah. Well, and I always, my mantra as because of that, and that goes to the technology of how the product works. It's a lanthanum based product. We have, it's either lanthanum chloride or there's the cerium, lanthanum. But basically, the technology of it is you're taking something, phosphates in the water are in solution, so they're soluble, right? The only way we can remove those is we have to take that and make it insoluble. So we have to attach something to that turns it into a solid. When it becomes a solid, right, that's going to drop out of solution, out of the water. That's basically how it works. And, some guys, even if they didn't have a test kit, they'd go, well, here's my test. I pour a little bit of phosphate remover, and if I see a cloud, then I know I have phosphate. Probably not the best way to test, but, it was showing you that, hey, this product is taking something soluble and making it insoluble, and it's clouding up the pool. And so my mantra would always be, I'd say to people buying my product and everything, I'd go, now listen, you do not want to do a phosphate removal treatment the day before the 4th of July or the day before Labor Day weekend or whatever pool party, type event or holiday. You do not want to do this because you're going to cloud up that pool and it may not clear up by the time the customer wants to use the pool.
Yeah.
And I've actually had that happen. I've had guys call me like 2 days before the 4th of July and they're like, they did what you did. It was the whole gallon and, the pool was clouded up. The filter was up to 40. And they're like, what do I do now? I said, well, clarifier.
Yeah. Well, I won't do that again. I was just doing an experiment. And that's one way I wanted to make sure that this stuff was actually working. And if you're looking for other podcasts, of course, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel Monday through Friday. I post one there. Also, if you go to swimmingpoollearning.com, click on the banner. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,700 podcasts for you there as well. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.